Hi, everybody. My name is Om. I'm one of the co-founders of WalletGuard. A little bit about myself is I've been a security nerd since I was 15. Background is in offensive security. Did a lot of ethical hacking over at Accenture prior to starting WalletGuard with Martin.
Hi everybody, my name is Martin, also one of the co-founders of WalletGuard. My background's as a full-stack engineer, previously at a Fortune 500 fintech company. A little bit about WalletGuard. Our browser extension currently protects over 100,000 users, and also one of our heuristics, or rather our engine protects also our APIs and serves threat intelligence. And so what better way to talk about the history of scams than to talk about the past types of scams we saw in the industry. A lot of the crypto OGs here will remember the doubling money scams that happened. Fortunately for us, scammers forgot that a lot of us played RuneScape back in the day, and this was not a terribly effective method of delivering scams for them. So then I'll pass it off to Om to talk about how these have advanced.
Yeah, so I mean, some of these trivial scams still exist and are proliferated throughout the space, like seed phrase stealers. And oftentimes it's social engineering techniques that get people who are often newer to the space. I mean, you just saw the Coinbase app move up in the ranking, like 100 ranks on the App Store. So you can only imagine all the new people that are inflowing into the space who have no idea what a seed phrase is, no idea what a private key is, and they're just giving this up willingly because they really just don't know, simply. And a lot of that problem is around education. I think it's on us as an industry to kind of solve that problem and better address it. Another type of very common scam that we see in the space is romance scams, so something Nikita was talking about a little bit earlier as well. So romance scams, also known as pig butchering, has been proliferated also throughout the space. Oftentimes, it can start with different things like interactions off dating apps, interactions off social media, or even a text message like, hey, Eric, who's Eric? And next thing you know, you're on a fake exchange depositing money. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's going up. And then when you want to withdraw, it's too late because obviously it's a fake exchange. So oftentimes a lot of people don't even report these types of thefts because it's a little bit embarrassing or personal, right? So thank you to everybody who does report these types of things. It helps us get better as an industry. Now, another thing that I like to draw a correlation between is Chainalysis did a great study on the correlation between price action, which I know everybody has seen a lot of price action today. So when price action is definitely high, scammers are more incentivized to come back into the space to scam. So we've definitely seen this through our own detection engines. When we detect websites on a daily basis, we've seen a massive spike over the past couple of months. But the correlation here being that as price action continues upwards, we're going to see a ton more scams in the space. So it's something to stay alert for, and definitely educate your friends to take a breath before they make a transaction. Now, to talk a little bit more about how scams are currently served and the meta of scams, we have to kind of bring it back to where a lot of these, the techniques kind of changed. So back in May of 2022, we do a lot on the education side. So as WalletGuard, we do a lot of weekly Twitter spaces or just going out to different places to talk about security education. And one of the things that we used to mention a lot was wallet segregation strategies in order to effectively mitigate risk that you might incur while interacting with a free mint or anything like that. So early on, we did say that free mints were going to become wallet drainers, and behold, in July, a couple months later after we made that statement, we started seeing the first instances of monkey drainer. So monkey drainer introduced this business model that Nikita was talking about earlier, the drainers as a service, very similar to the malware as a service industry that you see in the Web 2. And what happens here is you have your distributors and your developers. So the developers of the kits are collecting a 30% commission for any type of scam that's executed, and the distributors are the ones that are going ground level to make these SIM swaps happen. So we all saw the SIM swap with the SEC, we saw the SIM swaps with all these different places. So that being said, what they do, these distributors are going after high profile accounts, taking them over and then trying to take advantage of that audience. These tend to be the most effective. I mean, there are definitely scams that are like replies to a tweet or whatever the case is, but the most effective methodologies tend to be like a high profile account that gets SIM swapped. So doing things like basically what Monkey Drainer did and what he introduced was a lot of set approval for all scams. So the early instances was like ETH sign, which MetaMask worked really quickly to deprecate the ETH sign functionality, which was an awesome improvement. So hats off there. And the other thing there is that Monkey Drainer implemented this whole set approval for all scam, so approval farming, if you will. And what you would do is like, say you had a few pudgy penguins or whatever the case is, they would set approval all for the entire collection and would be able to then take all the assets as they are the malicious spender. Now, moving forward, you now see different types of scams that utilize open approvals that already exist, like on Seaport. So for example, if you are on OpenSea and I have granted an approval on OpenSea to list my assets, now that open approval can now be leveraged. So what attackers are doing is taking well-known smart contracts and leveraging them in a different facet. So what they do is create a private sale listing to themselves for 0 ETH, or for 0 ETH for you in return. And this is effectively how they're leveraging open approvals already in a gasless way to sign these assets. A lot of the common misconceptions, people used to think that gasless signatures can't affect your wallets, doesn't do state changes. People also think that connecting your wallet to a dApp is already malicious. So there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation in the space already as it is. But yeah, I'll pass it off to Martin here.
Yeah, I think it's a great point to talk about, us zooming out as an industry, making sure we, as all these newcomers come into the space, making sure that they're properly educated about these types of attack vectors. And one of the specific ways that we've seen scams proliferated the most over probably the last 2 years in particular, they've really evolved as of 2022 in the sense that you're actually interacting with legitimate contracts when you're getting scammed. So it's less about who you're interacting with at the contract level, but what's going in and out inside of that payload per se. So as Ohm mentioned earlier, the first time we saw this was really with Seaport, which is the OpenSea contract that allows you to basically list your assets on there for 0 ETH in return. And the common thread here that we want to portray is that a lot of these are being abused by malicious dApps. Malicious dApps are really the common thread here. Because in the environment where these dApps exist, the scammer has control over what they're requesting. And so what's really important to start considering is looking at the transaction from a 360-degree view, right? So not only are you looking at the transaction, but you're also looking at the Web 2 data as well. And so one of the other attacks that we saw recently was actually a technique being used through the Uniswap. We'll use this as a case study, but the Uniswap contract where you can actually see, again, you're allowed to set the to address in this function, which is essentially the swap function. And normally on the Uniswap interface, this would be set back to yourself. So the swap's coming back to you. The unfortunate nature of malicious dApps is that in this environment, the attacker can actually set themselves as the to address. So we actually saw a case where this was prompted for one of our extension users. They were being prompted with a transaction that would send 3.75 wrapped BTC to a scammer for nothing in return. This was $186,000 at the time, and it's more since. And so you can actually see that you're interacting with the official Uniswap v3 contract here, but due to the nature of what the actual payload is, that's what's making this malicious. Awesome. And I'll pass it over to Ohm now.
Yeah, one of the other interesting things to mention here is that this is kind of a fault of maybe not over-engineering, but building a feature that services 1% of users and then potentially puts the other 99% of users at risk, right? What's the actual rationale? I was asking some of the Uniswap's lead security engineers about what's the reason for this, and it's to swap into a cold wallet. So why? This specific thing is also available on 17 other functions on Uniswap, and we are actively seeing people do this. So the issue here is that we make one feature great for like 1% of users, and now 99% of other users are potentially at risk because now the signers are no longer setting to the to address. But all is not lost. Hats off to Sam CZ's son here, mainly because he's getting everybody in the security industry together to start kind of aggregating and talking about these problems. And these working groups are really going to be what helps Web3 get a lot more safe. Now, I really truly believe in the aggregation model. Like, you look in Web 2 and you look in traditional cybersecurity, it always moves towards aggregation. You see all these malware service providers or antivirus companies sharing YARA rules or sharing all these different types of threat intelligence, which is how you have high detection rates across the board. Now, what's important here is that once we get to an aggregation model like this in Web 3, that is truly when our users are going to be the safest, because there are providers like us, like Blockade, like Blowfish, and others out here that have all these types of detections, but we might have gaps in our detection, right? But the other provider might cover those gaps. That is exactly why aggregation is needed and is how we are going to secure the future of Web 3. Thank you.